Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Today is Tuesday, August something or other. I forget which day it is. It's 2015. It's just another day closer to the elections. How's that? It's I believe it's August 18th. Excuse me, August 18th, 2015. Joining me now, as always, the Prince of Twitter, Andrew Malcolm at AH Malcolm on the Twitters is investors.com/Andrew Malcolm, where he opines wisely and shrewdly at all times. Andrew, welcome back to the show.
Hey, good to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you here. Lots to discuss. Just so many different aspects of news stories. I guess the primary one that we're talking about, I mean, there's really two big main stories in the media right now. One is Hillary Clinton's email woes, the what I call the saga of the secret server, because I'm an alliteration fan. Or Donald Trump. So I'm, it's guest chooses day. It's almost like a Sadie Hawkins dance. You get to pick which one do you want to tackle first.
Well, we can always talk about Hillary. It's the thing is, she's trying to paint this as a right-wing conspiracy thing, which of course is what she said in the East Room when the Monica thing broke so many years ago, and hard to believe she's still here, and they're still here with all of their accompanying problems. But it's not. It's all her making. Nobody on any wing made her set up a personal server, and there's only one reason to do that, and that is to have complete control, and so others won't see what you're doing there. There's no other reason, and she got caught. And so it's a mess, and it's going to be a mess dragging on, and now people are talking about, who else might get in. There have been no signs from Elizabeth Warren, but the Biden people have been leaking stuff. I think he would like to run, and I thought it was unrealistic the other two times that Joe ran, but he might do it anyway and roll the dice and try to be seen as a savior, but he won't do it until SS Hillary is lower in the water.
There was an Al Gore trial balloon that was floated out. I think it was last week. Yeah, I lampooned that one pretty harshly. There's, Joe Biden. There's a problem with Joe Biden too. There's a whole problem with the Obama administration in general on this email server thing. I wrote a column about that. I came out yesterday at the Week. I mean, the problem, or it came out today. Excuse me, at the Week. The problem with this is that the email issues aren't limited to Hillary Clinton. Yesterday, there was a really interesting development yesterday, Andrew, where there was the State Department had admitted that they found 17,800 emails that might be responsive to a FOIA demand by Gawker. And what makes this so interesting is that 2 years ago, they told the court that they couldn't find any emails that were responsive from Philip Reince. Philip Reince, of course, is Philippe Reince, excuse me. Philippe Reince is Hillary's longtime advisor and was Deputy Assistant Secretary of State at the time that Gawker wanted to get these emails. Emails actually related to Reince's interactions with reporters. I think 33 different media outlets is what Gawker said. And the State Department insisted they couldn't find any of those emails. Now, that was 2 years ago. Gawker filed a lawsuit earlier this year in order to force the State Department to produce records. And then they showed up, apparently it was a week ago or so, in court and said, oh yeah, you know what? We found 17,800 emails that are responsive to this in their own systems, right? This isn't an issue of, well, it was because Reince was using the Hillary email server, which he was. Right. This is stuff in the State Department that he was using, and the State Department claimed that they couldn't find it. And that was after Hillary left. This was not this FOIA request came during the John Kerry era at the State Department. And they apparently aren't any more transparent than the Hillary era was. And so you have to be asking yourself at this point, You've got Operation Fast and Furious. You've got the IRS. For that matter, you've got NSA, where James Clapper went and lied to Congress. And now you've got the State Department under both
and
Secretaries
Eric Holder and Fast and Furious refusing.
Right. I mean, refusing to cough up records here. This is not just Hillary Clinton. So when John Kerry or Joe Biden try to jump into this race, either one of them, and we've heard little trial balloons from their supporters that it might be a good idea if one or the both of them got into this race. I mean, they're going to end up having the same issues that Hillary Clinton's got, only it's just not going to be quite as acute for them.
I agree totally. But their problems would come down the road, because I don't think either one of them, I don't think they'd have a chance, but I don't think either one of them would get in on to challenge Hillary. I think they would get in as a savior when Hillary was clearly, if something else comes out in the Benghazi hearings, or on October 22nd, or there's more of these email. This is a poisonous drip that she's undergoing. And at some point, the big Democrat money people in L.A. and New York are going to say, geez, this is, we stuck with you a long time. And if Joe and John get in, I think there'd be a lot of excitement on the Democrat side, and leaping off the boat to get onto the lifeboat. But in the end, you're right. They have the same sort of baggage to explain.
And honestly, I think that the problem here for them is that none of these people, they're all retreads, right? Every single one of them, even Hillary Clinton for that matter, is a retread. She lost in 2008. Right. Kerry got the nomination and lost in 2004. Joe Biden has lost twice, one time when he was caught plagiarizing speeches from Neil Kinnock. And you know who it was? You remember who it was that caught him doing that?
No.
E.J. Dionne.
Oh, really?
It was E.J. Dionne that wrote the New York Times article that exposed that. Yeah. So... Oh, the little interesting twists of time. Little
old EJ. Well, he'd be a champion of Joe's now. That's for sure.
Probably true. But EJ was a pretty is a pretty decent.
He's a very good reporter. As a columnist, he's bought and sold. He's always up at the White House for these private briefings of the president.
Well,
he's a nice guy, really nice guy.
Yeah, I have to say an aside. I completely agree with you. I've met EJ a couple of times. One time he came to a heritage event at which I was speaking just because he wanted to kind of take my measure and say hi, because we had communicated a little bit online. I was really surprised. I thought, EJ, what are you doing here at a heritage event? He said, well, I heard you were talking, so I thought I'd come by and check it out. It's like, well, that was really nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah. In 1984, a bunch of... the New York Times flooded the zone in those times. And a bunch of Times reporters were having dinner at the Marriott in downtown Des Moines, and there was an editor, one of the junior editors, flying in from New York, and she was late, very late. So we were, well into our dinner when EJ was there. We were well into our dinner when she arrived. And he said, what's the problem? The traffic in Des Moines wasn't that bad. And she said, boy, it was really hard getting a cab at the airport. And we said, let's put this in the journal, because she was probably and of course, being a New Yorker, you'd look for a cab anywhere. But the first person to fly into Des Moines and not rent a car was this editor. Oh, it was very funny.
And it's pretty easy to drive in Des Moines. Even in the winter, it's not too bad.
Of course, but the New York thinking was very revealing to guys who lived their lives somewhere else.
Oh yeah. Where are all the cabs?
Where are all the cabs? There's no cabs at the airport. No cabs.
Good luck. Good luck finding that. You probably could have called the hotel and probably could have gotten a shuttle, for that matter. But it's easier when you rent the car. All right, so you mentioned earlier, when we started talking about the Hillary Clinton thing, that she's trying to pass this off as the vast right-wing conspiracy redux. And, it's all partisan nonsense. That was Jennifer Palmieri's response to this. But, I seem to have missed the moment in which the Republican Party took over the FBI and the Department of Justice. Yeah. Chuck Todd was on Morning Joe earlier today, and he was out in Iowa, I guess last week. He must have been out in Iowa.
Yeah, a whole long time. He had that long interview with Trump.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So he was out there talking to voters, and he says, there's 3 little letters that really changed everything in terms of voter perception on this, and the 3 little letters are F, B, and I. He says, I heard this from voters themselves out there, is that if the FBI is investigating it, this must actually be something pretty serious, and it isn't a partisan witch hunt sort of thing. And I mean, it seems to me that the Hillary Clinton campaign, from Hillary Clinton on down, wants to evade that thing. Understandably so. They want to pass this off as a nothing burger, but it isn't selling. And you can see it reflected in the polls. It's really not selling. No,
it's not. But fortunately for her, there's no viable alternative at the moment.
Right.
A lot of people go to have fun at a Bernie Sanders rally, I have to be honest in the sense that I always felt that way about the FBI, but not in the last few years, I'm afraid.
I still kind of feel that way about the FBI. I'm just not certain about if the FBI finds stuff, if the Department of Justice is going to go forward with it. But, James Comey's a pretty independent sort of guy.
Well, he has been, yes. And that's the hope. And he was actually a Bush guy. And what was it? He did a couple. Oh, he was the special prosecutor, or he named the special prosecutor in the Scooter Libby thing.
Yes,
and he did. There was another time where he showed some independence. That's hopeful.
He threatened to resign with the Ashcroft thing. Remember when Ashcroft was in the hospital?
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, he went to the hospital to stick up for his authority at the time against Gomez or whatever his name was. So that's hopeful. What isn't hopeful is what is the FBI's complete inability to find anything wrong with the IRS scandal, anybody to indict, and the lack of production that came out of the Fast and Furious probe. Now, you may say that, that was Eric Holder sitting on that one, but it's the FBI. They're supposed to be able to do these things. So I'm hopeful, but with the Obama crowd from Chicago, I'm also realistic.
Yeah, I'm realistic too. I first off, it's probably going to take a little bit of time for the FBI to investigate this, even if they're playing, completely above board. And I actually think the FBI is probably still going to play this straight. There's really no upside for careerists in the FBI to game this one, and Comey is going to be there after Obama leaves. I mean,
have you seen that guy? He's about 9 feet tall.
Yeah, I heard that. I haven't actually seen him, but I understand he's a very tall guy.
Oh no, he must be almost 7 foot. When look at the guy. Okay. Yeah, sure. What do you want me to confess to?
Yeah, well, that comes in handy, right? So, So I don't see that as the problem, as the big question. What I see as the question is when the FBI has enough to recommend charges against people, either Hillary, her staff, or all of them, will the Department of Justice actually follow through? Because the FBI doesn't prosecute. All the FBI does is refer for charges. It takes the Department of Justice. And so now you've got Loretta Lynch in there, Barack Obama's appointee. She was a prosecutor. She was, I think, in New York, right? I think she was.
That's right.
Yeah. Yep. And so she's done her own thing. She understands prosecution. But she is still Obama's appointee. And you have to wonder, I mean, you really do. And here's the tension too, because at least one of the statutes under which Hillary and or her staff would be charged is 18 U.S. Code 1924. In 1924, the code, not the year. I wasn't around for the year, despite rumors.
Yeah, I was. It was a great year in the market.
Oh, there you go. All right, Andrew. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second, but that's all right. No, but that has to do with the unauthorized possession, retention of classified material, specifically classified material. Because there's another statute, and I'll get to that in a second. But just having the server at her house and having classified material on it is a violation of 1924. She was not authorized to retain that information after she left the State Department. The classification and clearance are dependent on whether or not you are whether or not there's a job requirement for you to know the information. You don't, just because you leave government with a top secret / compartmented clearance doesn't mean that you get to view it whenever the hell you want and you get to keep it. First off, it's got to be kept in a secure facility, an authorized secure facility. And secondly, you're only supposed to access it when you have a need to know. And that's true of all levels. I had a clearance, and I've talked about this before on the show. Everybody knows this. I had a clearance. It was a lower level clearance than that. When I was working for a defense contractor. And even for the stuff that was at my level of clearance, I couldn't just go wander off, go grab the book and start flipping through it, or go grab the material on whatever the system was that we were working on and start thumbing through it unless I had a need to know. And if I was accessing stuff that I wasn't I wasn't involved in, I would have been under investigation very, very, very quickly. It's what tripped Sandy Berger up, other than also putting it down his pants.
Jeez, can you imagine?
No, it's just, you got to be an idiot to try something like that. And so, but I mean, Sandy Berger was prosecuted under 18 U.S.C. 1924. So was David Petraeus. So was John Deutsch. And so were a whole lot of other people whose names you don't know because they weren't big, important people. But people get prosecuted under 1924. They also get prosecuted under 18 U.S. Code 793, which has to do with the transmission of classified material and the exposure of, actually, that 793 doesn't require it to be classified, it just requires it to be sensitive. And so classification markers don't mean anything in 793. If the material was sensitive and it had something to do with national security, you could be prosecuted for transmitting it in a way that's unsecured and unauthorized, which all of this was through the server. And we're finding out right now that they've gone through 6,000 emails, Andrew. 6,000 of them, and they found 305 of them that need referral to the intelligence community to see how high and whether this stuff needed to be classified. That's a 5%. That's 5%. That's an astounding failure rate in a system that is supposed to have no failures at all, 0 failures, and anything above 0 is at least technically a prosecutable offense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope, excuse me, I hope if there's something there that they follow through on it. I don't have the confidence that they will, but that's part of, and I'm not special in this regard, but that's part of the corrosion of values in this country under this administration, which plays fast and loose with everything. Remember, $540 million to the Obama bundler for Solyndra and so on. And they get away with it by stonewalling, which is what Hillary's trying to do. If you have to answer something about it, say almost anything. And you can go through what she said starting in March, and about 2 weeks later, you find out that another piece is untrue, another piece is untrue, another piece is untrue. I mean, I'm surprised that whatever it is, 48% or 47% still trust her. Boy, if they were in the mortgage business, they wouldn't. So I don't know. It's all part of this, what I find to be anyway, very depressing scenario in the country. And next to that, we have next to the Democrat aging white plugged in crowd trying to become president, allegedly, is this immense, dynamic, qualified Republican field, which does provide hope if they don't get at some point into a circular firing squad. Trump seems to have locked in his 24, 25, 26% crowd, and which is first place, obviously, in this field. Seeing the Fox News poll, Walker fell, Rubio fell, Fiorina climbed up, Carson climbed way up. So it's like Herman Cain last time. So the people are watching and studying this group, and on the 16th, your friend Hugh Hewitt will be one of 3 moderators at the Reagan Library debate.
Will be. Huh? I said yes, he will be.
Yeah, and I think Dana Bash and Jake Tapper will be the others, and we'll get another chance to see. I was originally they were going to have everybody there, and I thought this was going to be one panel, but it's going to be 2 again. 2 panels, debate panels, but their qualifying criteria are polls from mid-July until mid-September. So this would be a much broader field. A much broader measurement of support, and I hope that some of the people from the original second debate will get into the first, but I heard that CNN was going to have both of them in prime time, so that's encouraging. Because there's, I'm trying. I'm not successful every day, Ed, but I am trying to look at the plus side of all of these folks, and I know there's a lot of people on Twitter and elsewhere who are eager to start disqualifying people because of something they said about immigration 6 years ago or something. But I'm trying to keep my eyes open. And boy, is this an impressive field? Not all equally impressive, not all impressive in the same areas, but
right.
Boy, it's. And it would appear, now you're the poll guy with numbers, but it would appear to me anyway that for the moment Trump seems to have reached his ceiling.
It does look that way, yeah.
And that's great when you've got 16 other competitors, but when you start losing them, as we will, some of them this fall and certainly by December, there won't be 16 others, and with the exception of Cruz, I don't think that the supporters of the others are likely to gravitate to Trump. So I think it'll be much more of a race.
I'm not even sure if that's true of Cruz either. I think that the supporters of Cruz, I think the people who are, I'm with you on this. I think the people who were going to be attracted to Trump are already attracted to Trump. Yeah. And as this thing narrows down to 4 or 5 people, 24% in a field of 4 or 5 can still be pretty significant. But
Huckabee won Iowa with 30 in 08.
Yep.
30%.
Yep. And that's really easy to do in Iowa too. I mean, that's it becomes a little bit more difficult down the road. But I mean, if you still have 4 or 5 viable candidates and you're still drawing 25% of the base. Yeah, I mean, you can win with that. There's no doubt about that. I think the plateauing is a signal that this is kind of run its course. It's not dropping off, but I'm saying that it's probably hit its market peak. Now, I'm talking about not Trump as a whole, but I'm talking about Trump as he has been presenting himself over the last 2 or 3 months. He's attracted just about everybody he's going to attract. He's pushed a couple of people into sort of the margins because he's sucked up some of the oxygen. And I think even Trump is realizing that's one of the reasons why he released an immigration plan this week, is because he's trying to shift to policy. Now, his immigration plan is kind of short, actually, on policy. It's mostly conceptual, but that's also true of Marco Rubio's plan to replace Obamacare. It's 3 pillars. It's basically 3 paragraphs. He's been talking about it a long time. He actually wrote the same op-ed in March that apparently nobody remembered it. And I mean, seriously,
but Ed does.
I mean, because
don't try to slip this stuff past Ed.
I have to admit, the reason why I knew that was because I saw the link someplace else. And but I mean, it's a measure of where we've been at in this cycle. It's not a serious part of the cycle. It is really mostly about getting earned media, getting name recognition, being controversial, and attracting attention. You don't get into policy really until after Labor Day or right around this point in time.
And I've heard that Trump is doing at least some initial organizing in Iowa, which is good for a week after Iowa, and then comes New Hampshire. And I've noticed that a lot of the other candidates, Perry, Cruz just finished a week-long bus trip through the Southeast. They're trying to create their own firewall and get their own support. So, Trump could make a big splash in the first 2 there, Iowa and New Hampshire, and then he runs into some trouble because he doesn't have the ground troops in other places. The other thing I thought was interesting was that Trump has started, in my mind, gratuitously attacking Carly Fiorina. And then that raises in my mind, why is that? Because she's way down below him. But if you think about it, they both appeal to the same kind of folks. That is, they're both outsiders, non-Washington, non-politician, and business successes. And so Trump dragged in a couple of hits on her over the weekend, which I thought was less effective and more revealing of where his concerns might be.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, I'm going to have to interrupt here, Andrew, because we have breaking news. You're going to enjoy this. It was on our earlier topic. The FBI, this is on NBC News, just came across a few minutes ago. The FBI may be able to recover at least some data from Hillary Clinton's private email server, even though there was an attempt to wipe it. 2 sources with direct knowledge of the process told NBC News on Tuesday. Let's see. The Clinton campaign has previously acknowledged that there was an attempt to wipe the server before it was turned over last week to the FBI. The FBI, quote, will try to figure out what's there, how it got there, and who put it there. Apparently they tried to wipe it. And I was saying this the other day. People were saying, "Oh, it's wiped. It's gone. It's gone." It's like, let's not forget that this was the same people who couldn't secure the email server in the first place, who couldn't figure out even to encrypt the email server at first. And you're telling me that these guys are suddenly going to become world-beating experts at wiping hard drives? No, I don't think so.
No.
So, yeah.
And let's just take away for a moment. You can't, but let's just take away for a moment the email problem. Hillary is proving to be one of the worst top-level campaigners I have ever seen. Did you see her attempt at self-deprecating humor over the weekend, where she said that, and it was scripted because she was reading it off the teleprompter. Did you see some of you see that I have a new Snapchat account, and I love it. And the beauty is they delete themselves, and the crowd there laughed. But when you hear it as an outside observer, you cringe, and it's like, whoa. Self-deprecation is a very powerful political tool, but on something that's this bad for her, it appears dismissive of something that's really pretty serious.
Exactly. And Mark Halperin was saying that he was standing in the crowd when she tried that. You heard in the clip that, some people started cheering, but he said there were audible gasps around me. People around here don't think it's a joking matter. And, and people were talking, Chris Cillizza wrote today, I wrote a post about this, and so far it's our highest traffic post of the day, about the fact that Chris Cillizza's Democrats are talking to Chris Cillizza, basically panicking. It's like, oh my God, she's awful. Can you believe that joke that she told at the Iowa fair? It's terrible. And did you see the video of her talking with the Black Lives Matter activists? Came out, I think, late last night, early this morning. Good Magazine is the one that videotaped this, and this is apparently from a week ago in Boston. But these videos just came out. And she's terrible. She's condescending to them. She starts talking about, well, I was, my experience is in the civil right, the original civil rights movement. She was 19 years old? She wasn't even that. I think she was a Goldwater girl in '64 when they passed the Voting Rights Act, right?
Yeah.
So it's her involvement in the early civil rights movement. Her body language is tense, and then she's like this with the guy that she's talking with. Not that the guy is all that much better, but she's just a terrible candidate. She's terrible at this. She's terrible on the stump, and she has no instincts for this. And it's coming across, and it may not have mattered if her nose was clean on all this stuff and there was no scandals to talk about. It may not have mattered. It's one of those things where the name could have probably gotten her by, but clearly that is no longer the case.
No. And you may remember, I do, because it was so stunning to me, having come out of being in a national political campaign some years before, but I think it was the fall of '07, she was campaigning in Iowa and answered some questions in a town hall, and handled them very well. And one of the women, young college student, went up to a reporter afterwards and complained because she had wanted to ask another question. And the reporter said, well, you can get in line. She said, no, I asked a question, but they told me to ask that question. And CNN jumped on that story, and that was how Clinton was planting questions in the crowd. Now that, number one, is a real amateur move.
Right.
Okay. First of all, Obama denounced it. Oh, this is terrible. Of course, he does exactly the same thing, but you do it better. What you do is you find someone who likes you. This girl came just out of curiosity. You find someone who likes you, like a county chairman or someone, and you say, well, how would you like to be on national TV? And they go, oh, yeah, right. So, well, why don't you, I know the candidate wants to talk about this. Why don't you ask this question? And they do. Now, then they have a vested interest in not telling the world that they were given the question, because it makes them look smart, and they got some fame and celebrity out of it, and they appreciate the campaign helping them with that. And you get the candidate who's well prepared on that issue to answer it, as Clinton was. You don't go up to somebody, just grab somebody coming in the door of the event and say, hey, how would you like to ask a question? Now, that's one side of it. The other side is that her staff obviously felt she needed help in that area, and so they were going to plant these questions. It doesn't matter. I'm sure she did know, because she called on the girl, and those candidates are told generally where to look for the people that they're going to call on, and just as the people at the Obama news conferences are pretty sure they're going to get called on. Ari Fleischer has said publicly that he used to put the people he didn't want the president to call on in a certain part of the audience, and then just tell Bush, don't call in anybody in the upper right. These things get handled, but once again, as now, she's so klutzy about it.
Yeah. she's very klutzy about it, and that's the reason why Democrats are starting to really panic at this point. Because
well, I guess it shows the system works.
Yeah.
If someone gets in trouble for this, I mean, I can't believe that even Loretta Lynch or Comey are gonna go after Hillary Clinton, the ex-president's wife. I find that this administration is not going to do that. She would, except for Joe, she's the only one who, as president, would be the guardian of whatever there is in Obama's legacy.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, Andrew, we're almost out of time, but that means we've got to get to the jokes of the day. The jokes of the week, I should say. Jokes of the week,
yeah. So speaking of klutzy, Seth Meyers said that Hillary Clinton disputes Trump's claim that she attended his wedding because he gave her a lot of campaign donations. She actually attended, she said, because she thought it would be fun. And then she added, am I saying that right? Fun.
Okay.
Yeah. Conan O'Brien said that Google announced its restructuring under a new name, Alphabet. The company actually announced this a month ago on Google+, but no one noticed.
Yeah, I'm on Google+. Nobody's there.
Yeah,
it's a
right, exactly. And Seth Meyers said that Bernie Sanders has now passed Hillary Clinton in the New Hampshire polls. It's the first time anyone's ever been passed by a guy in a Prius. And then finally, Seth Meyers also said that despite no longer working, remember this aide of Trump's who allegedly got fired?
Yeah. Nebus, right?
Despite no longer working for Donald Trump, the former campaign strategist Roger Stone said today that he still fully supports his former boss. At which point Trump said, okay, cut him down.
I always think of Donald Trump sort of as like the George Steinbrenner of Wall Street.
Yes.
And he just keeps firing people, bringing them back.
George Steinbrenner was Cleveland's revenge on New York. He came from Cleveland and he went to New York and screwed up and had some successes with the Yankees. And then, what's his name now? He's dead. The guy that owned the Cleveland, Art Modell. He came from New York and went to Cleveland and screwed up the Browns. So we've got a thing going in that city there.
I guess you do.
Anyway, so well, this was fun as usual.
As usual.
I guess we'll be back next week, I hope.
Back next week and bigger than ever. That's what I say. Back next week and bigger than ever with Andrew Malcolm of investors.com/Andrew Malcolm. By the way, investors.com is a great site. You should check the whole thing out because it's got a lot of great talent in there, especially on the editorial side. And of course, Andrew is the Prince of Twitter at @AHMalcolm. The Prince.
I'm gonna get that on my tubes though.
I'm gonna start calling you the Fresh Prince. I'm gonna call you the Fresh Prince of Twitter.
I don't think that would work.
No, I think that's pushing it. The Prince of Twitter because he's a prince of a guy. Andrew Malcolm, thanks for being with us. We will talk to you again next week, senor.
Okay, see you, folks.
See ya. Andrew's been my co-pilot for the first part of the Ed Morrissey Show, and now we will go ahead and get Ashe Schow on the line. Let me go ahead and give her a call. I'm actually doing this correctly so that I'm not displaying anybody's information in the intermediate sense. And I believe we have her on the line now. Ashe, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you?
I am doing well. There we go. Very nice. You're on and everything. This is perfect. Ashe, you were just recently in Miami for the Society of Professional Journalists symposium on Gamergate. I thought this was going to be a really good opportunity for all sides to come together to talk to the media about what is essentially really a media ethics controversy. And both sides did show up, kind of. Tell us about what happened out there at SPJ Airplay.
Well, it brought together pro Gamergate supporters and also a panel of neutral people, which were two journalists. There was Ren Laforme with the Poynter Institute, and there was Lynn Walsh with NBC in San Diego, and there was also Derek Smart, who is a game developer. All of these people were not necessarily pro-Gamergate. They were not anti-Gamergate. Lynn had really no knowledge of it prior to this event. So we were all together, and our panel, the Pro Gamergate panel, was there to explain it to journalists who had never heard of it before, or who perhaps didn't understand it. So we were there to really boil it down to what Gamergate really is about, which is about ethics in journalism, despite the media narrative that it's about harassing women in video games and sexism and misogyny, and you know how the war on women narrative is so popular these days.
So I think the journalists that agreed to do this forum, I don't want to say skepticism, but approached it with a sense of perhaps a little bit of caution in accepting the narrative from the Gamergate folks. I mean, would you say that professionally? So I would say, based on the comments that were being made, that they were coming into it to find out more about it, but I'm not sure that they were really thinking that this was a thing.
Yeah, I think that there was some skepticism going in, and which is why the panel that I was on, which was the first panel, because there was actually two panels. In the first panel, we came prepared with concrete examples of ethics failures in gaming journalism, and we didn't get to all of our topics and all of our examples, so we'll probably be doing a stream in a week or so in order to point those out. But yeah, so that's why we came with the concrete examples to say, here, this is what happened, this is why it's unethical, and to get their take on it. And in the end, at least on the first panel, the journalists that were there did agree that there are ethics problems in games journalism, major ones.
And I think that perhaps they were a little surprised to find themselves in agreement with you, that maybe they hadn't really heard the story, but had been sort of screened off from it, from this cloud of continuous accusations and character assassination that was going on towards the people who were complaining about these ethical failures.
Right. To begin with, I mean, if you've heard just a little bit about Gamergate, you've probably heard it in the context of women being harassed online, and not from the journal ethics and journalism standpoint. That is what the hashtag actually represents. So I do believe that they were at least familiar enough in that regard. So sure, when you come in and you hear people saying, no, that's not what it is, it's about this, you're probably going to tend to be skeptical. But, you know, I think we won them over in the end.
So the first panel goes through, I'm going to just say, with a fair amount of pretty smoothly, right? It went through pretty smoothly. There weren't too many issues that popped up from this. You felt like you had an opportunity to have your case made, and the second panel comes up. The second panel actually had Milo Yiannopoulos on it and some other folks on it, correct?
Christina Hoff Summers,
that's right,
of American Enterprise Institute, and Kathy Young of Reason.
And so all three of these, certainly, you know, Milo's kind of a fun guy, and we had him on the show a couple of weeks ago, and it was a blast. I had a blast talking with Milo. It's just, you know, you've talked to Milo, you know Milo's great. Yeah. But certainly kind of a guy who's going to spice up the conversation. Christina Hoff Summers, though, and Kathy Young, pretty, you know, straightforward, calm, almost genteel, I would say, with Christina Hoff Summers, approaches to communication. What happened there? What happened in panel 2?
Well, during panel 2, it got very combative, because Milo and Kathy and Christina all came with this idea that not only are they going to talk about how you're supposed to cover something like Gamergate, but you're also going to have to discuss the problems in the past. And they wanted to bring up the issues of gender that have permeated Gamergate, whether you're for ethics in journalism or believing that it's a harassment campaign, gender is a part of that.
Right.
And so they were trying to discuss that. So the host, Michael Koretsky, who did a wonderful job putting it together, was a bit more combative, trying to steer the conversation toward what journalists need to do now and in the future to cover movements like Gamergate. And so that created some testy exchanges. And about half an hour before the panel was set to conclude, the cops burst in saying that we need to evacuate the entire building. And so we were all sent out to the street. We were progressively moved further and further away from the auditorium until we were about maybe 2 blocks away in the sweltering Miami heat. And that panel didn't get to conclude, although after we were outside for 2 hours, Koretsky decided that we're going to reconvene with the panelists that had remained. Milo and Christina had left for cooler air, but the panelists who had remained gathered in front of an abandoned house, along with a whole bunch of attendees who were there for Gamergate and for the other journalism panels that were going on during this conference. And we continued the conversation, had a really great question and answer session.
What was the reaction from the journalists who were there who, it was more than one bomb threat, right? I mean, I was kind of following this on Twitter, and it seemed to me that we were talking about more than one evacuation, or maybe it was just getting pushed further and further back. But did their I've heard anything from 2 bomb threats to up to maybe 10. There were some that it had apparently been going on all day. They were getting bomb threats, but they weren't taken seriously until the one in the afternoon, which was sent to the Miami Herald and forwarded to the police, which gave a specific time that the bomb was supposed to go off. So that was kind of made it a little bit more credible to the police. So that's why they finally evacuated. They eventually evacuated the entire conference. So all these people who had absolutely no clue about Gamergate or involvement in the panel were all standing around having no idea what was going on. And they didn't seem that terrified, but they were definitely confused. And this is kind of what I'm curious about. Because I saw a little bit about this give and take on Twitter, because it's hard to miss this when it was going on, right? I mean, I knew that this was going to be happening. There were a number of people I knew that were going to be there, and it was I was curious as to how it was going to turn out. I didn't know it was going to turn out the way it did. But did the attitude of the journalists that were covering this event, this symposium, change after the bomb threat started coming through? I mean, did you notice a different approach after this point in time?
Not really. During the first panel, they seemed very open to listening and accepting, what Gamergate was providing as far as evidence of ethics and journalism breaches. During the second panel, they seemed a bit less accepting, to the point where they were kind of acting dumbfounded as to whether journalists, how journalists go about finding sources for their stories, which seemed really odd given their behavior in the first panel. But then after the bomb threat, after we reconvened in front of the abandoned house and continued the discussion, they went back to how they were during the first panel, where they were very open. They were, agreeing that there ethics breaches, and especially with the Game Journal Pros list, where there was a bunch of games journalists getting together and colluding as to what stories to write and when to write them. If you recall, this is like Journalist with Ezra Klein and the liberal writers. So yeah, they definitely agreed that's shady.
So then my question is did you come away from that thinking that there was going to be a stronger commitment to cover the Gamergate issues on the part of the media that were there? Because honestly, and Milo was on my show, like I said, a couple of weeks ago. And the reason why I wanted him on there is because he was blasting conservative media for not paying closer attention to this, because this is really the same fight that we've had for years and years, decades, on media bias, and we've largely dropped the ball on that. And he gave us a little credit, hot air, because we've done a little bit of reporting on this, and I've done a couple of shows on this before Milo came on. But basically, I said, hey, may I couple to us too? I mean, yeah, we should have been covering this much more in depth. And our our good friend Cranky T-Rex, who is in the chat room, has been pushing me to cover this. And I was very resistant at first, mostly because I wasn't a part of the gamer culture, and I felt like I would be going in and just completely not grasping what the situation was, who the players were. I felt very out of my element. Since then, I've become a little bit more comfortable with it. But honestly, I mean, I think that may be part of the reason why these guys aren't covering it. But after having experienced this, and after having talked with you guys about this, do you get the sense that they're over that now and they're understanding that this is an actual story?
Well, the journalists that were there, perhaps. If you go and look at the stories that were written in the aftermath of this, or lack thereof, there have really not been any much MSM coverage of this. And initially there was, I believe it was NPR, had an article out saying that this was, harassment against women, which to their credit, they did change it, and they softened the language a bit. Polygon, which is one of the bigger problems in as far as ethics goes. They also had a pretty down the middle article until the last 2 paragraphs where they were kind of discussing that they believe, the harassment narrative. As for going forward, the journalists who were there might have a better understanding, but, they weren't all journalists. So there's still more work to be done. So we reached a lot of people, but not nearly enough. So I think that going forward, there's going to have to be many, many, many more discussions like the one we had at Saturday.
Actually, Cranky T-Rex has a question. The question was, who was the guy with the camera that looked local talking to you guys when you were outside? Was that one of the local television stations that was covering the bomb threat?
Well, Telemundo did show up, and CBS got there as we were going back into the building. I believe there was somebody perhaps from the Miami Herald was there, just walking and talking to people. The camera that you see, the video camera that you see in front of us, in front of the abandoned house, that was a group of documentary filmmakers who were making a documentary about Gamergate, so that they were right up close filming that.
So there's going to be a documentary coming out about this then at some point. Did you get a sense of what their perspective was, or is it just a straight up reportorial documentary?
Well, I think that they're doing a documentary, at least what it seems to me, to try and tell Gamergate's side of everything. They wanted to talk to the people who had attended, the panelists. I was interviewed for it, just why it's important to you, why you're a gamer, showing people that Gamergate is not made up of awful, misogynistic, hateful people.
How important was it to have women there representing the Gamergate perspective? I mean, in the set, we were just talking about the idea that, the bringing up issues of gender and that sort of thing. That's certainly been a major component of the anti-Gamergate argument, is that it's misogynistic and that. I mean, you were there, Christina Hoff Sommers was there, Kathy Young was there. How important was it to have those voices on the panel, do you think?
Well, it was important, but you see this as the same as the right-left issue of the war on women, where they say that the Republican Party is all old white men, and whenever a Republican woman does step forward, she's shouted down as, being a tool of the patriarchy or being a moron, or, same thing with an African-American Republican like Ben Carson, things that he gets called. So they try to either pretend that these people don't exist or discount them as morons and or as, just party puppets, basically.
Right.
So you see it in the same way. So Christina Hoff Sommers is one of the most well-known advocates for Gamergate, and Kathy Young as well. So having them there was important, but they weren't token. I mean, they are 2 of the most well-known names. There was another person, Oliver Campbell, who was originally supposed to have my slot, but he backed out due to some differences. He's African American, and he is also one of the top speakers. And if you were to look, I don't know if they panned the crowd during the impromptu panel outside, but if you look at that crowd, it was, maybe 50% not white male that was there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's an incredibly diverse group, probably more diverse than most political groups that you would see.
Ashe, what was the reaction from the outlets that were sort of the problematic outlets, the beginning of Gamergate? I mean, what kind of reaction did you see there?
One of the worst offenders is Kotaku, which is part of Gawker's media. And since both of the major examples that we were able to bring up during the first panel involved Kotaku reporting, they were asked by several outlets for a comment, and their response was that they were not going to comment because it is too toxic.
It's too toxic to comment on their own reporting. It's too toxic.
That or Gamergate, or I don't know what the toxic was especially referring to, but it was funny that their response was no comment.
Yeah, it's kind of amusing right now because they've actually advanced the Hillary Clinton email story a couple of times. So I mean, it's not like everything that Gawker does is garbage, right? I mean, they've actually done some important work on the Hillary Clinton email thing. And I'm just kind of
and even Kotaku has had some decent reporting. It's weeding out the bad reporting and getting more of the good reporting.
Right, exactly. This is the same point I make about people who talk about media bias, is that we're not here to shut down media outlets. We're here to provide a feedback loop so they improve the work that they're doing, and to inform people who's doing good work, who's not doing good work at the granular level, and that's what that's about, and that's what Gamergate is about, is to improve the media that covers this, because the media is important, and you do want coverage for gamer issues. I mean, it's Gamergate people do not want no coverage at all of the gaming industry. That would be ludicrous. It would. I mean, they're a major market. They should be covered, but they should be covered fairly, and they should be covered ethically. And that's the root of what was going on. I'm glad that the Society of Professional Journalists actually invited you to discuss that.
No, absolutely. It was a great opportunity, and despite the bomb threat, I think everybody had a really great time. We all went out and had drinks afterwards and got to just sit around talking to everybody about video games and, ethics and, what's going on with the media now. It was great.
And this is the opportunity, I think, that conservatives have really missed out on by not touching this, is because this is exactly what we've been talking about in the conservative media ever since I've been blogging, ever since Bernie Goldberg wrote that 1996 Wall Street Journal column that exposed CBS News' editorial bias. So this was it's still out there, by the way. It's not too late. People can talk about this. People can cover it. People like Ashe, of course, are already covering it for the Washington Examiner, where she is located at the moment, by the way. And you can find WashingtonExaminer.com is the site, and Ashe is on Twitter at Ashe Schow. That's her name without a space and the @ symbol at the beginning. The link is in the show post, but Ashe, as always, it's great to have you on the show. Can't wait to get you back on again to discuss this and other things. I know, and I should mention this before I let you go. You've been doing great work on the Title IX stuff at colleges and universities. Keep up that really great work. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll talk to you again soon.
All right.
All right, folks, and now we're going to go ahead and talk to Peter Schaumber, former NLRB chair, who is joining us today. National Labor Relations Board. I should probably explain that a little bit better. Former chair of the National Labor Relations Board is joining us right now to discuss a rule change that just came through, which Peter argues strips workers of their privacy and leaves them at risk for ambush union tactics. Welcome to the show, sir.
Yeah, very welcome. Good to talk to you.
It's good to have you on. I hope I introduced that correctly. I mean, that was my take from your piece in the Wall Street Journal, was that this is a real risk for workers in places that unions want to organize. Explain what the rule is and what it does.
Well, the principal purpose of the rule really is to shorten the period of time between the time the union files a petition for an election and the election. Prior to this rule going into effect, the median time for all elections was anywhere between 32 and 38 days. This attempts to shorten that time down to as few as 8 or 9 days. The impact of that is that employers will have little time to learn about the union, what the union may have promised employees in exchange for their support, anything about the union officers, how successful the union has been in representing its employees or employees before other employers. Really very relevant information that employees should have. And the purpose of the rule, from my perspective, is really to deny employees that information so that the primary story that employees will hear is the union story. The point of my article went into further detail as to specific provisions of this ambush election rule, which I don't think been adequately been covered. One is what you mentioned. It requires employers to give the union the personal email addresses and personal cell phone number of its employees. Now, this is information that the employee may have provided the employer on condition that it remain confidential.
Right.
It will only be used in the event of an emergency. This is like giving out a person's unlisted telephone number.
Right.
All cell phone numbers are unlisted.
Right. I mean, this is the part that I guess in part I find it difficult to understand this, Peter, because this whole process is a little mystifying to me. If people wanted the unions to have their phone number, is there anything that really prevents them from contacting the union and giving the phone number or contacting the union directly? Employers are not allowed to retaliate against employees who are in contact with union organizers in the first place. I mean, that's a federal law that already protects employees. So why do employers have to cough up this information at all?
Well, according to the NLRB, it has to now, and one of the reasons it gave was that 50 years ago, the board ruled that employers had to give the union the name of its employees and their home addresses. And it said that in those 50 years, there have been no experience has been with the union abuse of that information. Well, in fact, there has been. I cited a case in my article in 2008 where 2 employees at the City of Boulder Hospital in Nevada complained to their employer that they essentially were being harassed to sign up for the union. Well, as a result of that complaint, the hospital decided to repost a lawful anti-harassment policy, which essentially said, you can't harass your fellow employees. Well, the union filed a charge, and the board ruled that the reposting of that lawful anti-harassment policy during a union organizing campaign was an unfair labor practice because the employer essentially could not interfere and prevent the harassment of employees by other employees on the union issue. I mean, which the board was saying that what is harassment is in the eyes of the beholder. And just because some employees think it's harassment, other employees may not. So the short of it is there has been abuse. And by giving the union the personal cell phone numbers and email address of employees, this gives the union the ability anytime, anywhere, to contact the employee, to send them an unwanted email or to make an unwanted call, to ask the employee, for example, that we want you to come to a union meeting. And the employee is kind of betwixt and between. He doesn't want to say yes, he doesn't want to say no. He fears if he says no and the union wins, they'll use his no against him afterwards, So it really puts the employee in a terrible position. It was proposed that employees be given the option to opt out of this requirement. In other words, to say, well, I don't want this information to be provided to the union, but the board rejected that.
So they rejected even an opt-out for this? I mean, that seems very unreasonable. I mean, if an employee really doesn't want that phone number to go out, I guess I'm mystified at that too, Peter. I mean, if the employee doesn't want his phone number going to the union, I mean, specifically says, I do not want my phone number going to any other purpose except for work purposes. That to me is a huge privacy violation. Handing out those phone numbers is a huge privacy violation. How did that? I mean, I know how it happened. I'm not naive. You've got 3 Obama appointees. You've got 2 Republican choices, I guess you can say, on the NLRB, and that's been the case all along. So I'm not naive about how it happened, but how did they justify that?
Well, they justified not giving the employees the opt-out provision because the in the majority said that this would expose employees to information they may not be, and this is the language, predisposed to. In other words, this may expose employees to information they don't want or they're opposed to. That shows the disregard for workers' rights by Democrat appointees to the NLRB when its union privilege is at stake, and it's the union privilege which the board comes down in favor of. And that's it's mind-boggling to most people, but in fact, this is exactly what happened, and these are the reasons that the board gave.
And this is taking place in the context, of course, of unions losing ground over the last several decades, especially in the private sector. I mean, for the most part, they've become a non-entity in the private sector outside of the, mine workers, pipe fitters, the construction trades, and the auto industry. And you have states passing right-to-work laws now that further undermine their ability to control workers. I mean, Michigan of all places, Wisconsin of all places, those were practically the birthplace of the union movements in the United States. And both of those states now are right-to-work states. Unions can't collect dues by force. They can't force employers to collect the dues for them. And workers can opt out of paying anything at all. So they're obviously losing ground in the private sector. This, to me, looks like sort of a backdoor effort to try to force their way back into private sector businesses through intimidation tactics. I mean, there's really no other reason to be collecting people's cell phone numbers other than to have that sort of leverage over them, right?
I would agree with you. Now, again, the board will say, well, this is giving the union the same information the employer has and the like, but it depends on the circumstances in which the information was given to the employer. Well,
I'm not necessarily sure. I mean, why should unions have access to the same information that employers have? The worker has a voluntary association with an employer in which that information was handed over voluntarily. That's not the case with the unions. First off, there's no, at least at that point in time, there's no voluntary association with the unions, and there's been no voluntary transmission of this information to the union. So I'm not sure why that's a protected that's a privilege that should be transferable between the employer and the union.
Well, that's some of the explanation that was given by the board. I agree with you.
I know you agree with me on this, by the way.
I think this kind of overreach is going to backfire on the labor movement and going to backfire on the board. When you mentioned there's an increasing number of states that have passed right-to-work laws, I think in part that's in response to the overreach. And I think there'll be more and more employers will become more familiar with all of these issues. They'll be and they will be able to more readily get involved in campaigns, albeit they'll be very, very short against the unions. I don't think in the long haul it's going to help unionization.
No.
And over the last 4 months, I've just seen bits and pieces of figures. I don't know the extent to which you can rely on them, but they say now the median time for board elections has been reduced to something like 20 or 22 days, with a few elections being held within 14 days. But the union win rate has not gone any higher than it was before, roughly 63%.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, yeah, I do think. But again, I don't know whether just numbers over a 4 period of time how telling that is. But I do think that over the long haul, it's going to backfire. And in fact, I'm in the midst of thinking about writing an article that perhaps it's time for Congress to consider a national right to work bill, which would protect workers.
Yeah, might be
from this kind of overreach by government bureaucrats.
Well, and I think it certainly would be an interesting option to take up for a number of reasons at the federal level, but I mean that gets us out into other areas. Let's stick with this particular area. This passed with the NLRB, so it's an effective regulation starting now. Is that correct?
That's right. In fact, it went into effect in April.
Okay, so it went into effect in April. Is Congress able to do anything about an NLRB regulation such as this? Can they? I know that there's such a thing as called the Congressional Review Act, and I'm sure that applies to the NLRB. It does require, however, Barack Obama to sign off on whatever the CRA expects to rescind. But are there any other options that they can use?
Well, let me say, in answer to your question, as you know that they tried the Congressional Review Act, and Obama just refused to sign it. They have proposed, there's 2 pieces of legislation that have been proposed in order to try to restrict some of the worst parts of what's called as ambush election rules, such as the requirement that employees be personal contact information be provided. And it's better than simply opting out. What it provides for is that an employee has to provide one piece of contact information. It could be his home address, but it does not have to provide any more unless it wants to. Essentially, it also provides for a period of time during which there can be a campaign on the issue as to whether or not the employee should vote for the union. Because again, what this rule is trying to do is trying to restrict the time and trying to busy the employer with a variety of other things so that it's not going to have time to address the issue as to whether or not the employee should unionize. So also, there's been a lot of talk about trying to restrict funding to prohibit the board from using any appropriated funds to put this ambush election rule into effect, or to continue with it in effect.
Peter, I think ultimately the solution here is to elect a different president who's going to appoint different types of NLRB members to the board, and the NLRB can revisit this in a future session, I'm sure, and revisit this rule. Is that correct?
They can, and I'm confident that they will. You raise another point. There has been a Reform Act which has been proposed, which will change the board. Instead of having 3 members from one party, whoever has the White House, and 2 from the other, it would have an equal number of board members, 3 and 3 from each party.
That makes sense.
The problem with that is when you put that into effect, this board has been able to overturn decades of board law, and that law has to be addressed by another board. Once that law is addressed, that would be the time to make it equal on equal number of both sides. Right,
sort of like an ethics committee would be for Congress. They have equal numbers of members, and therefore they don't act unless there is a fairly decent consensus that action is needed. So in theory, a better system, but in practice, you need to undo some of the stuff that this radical board has done before you can go to that.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I proposed that, in fact, the authority of the 5-member board would be best served if it was given to federal judges.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Although, I say that, and now I'm thinking of this recent decision by a district court judge affirming the ambush election. She was an Obama appointee, a relatively new appointment to the District of Columbia District Court.
Yep.
And her decision is not well done. A lot of holes in it. She bobs and she weaves. She never addresses, for example, the invasion of privacy that the requirement that employee personal contact information provided. There's a lot of holes in it.
Yeah, and I hear you on that. Of course, Obama was able to stack up the district, the D.C. District courts, thanks to the Harry Reid rule change in late, was that 2013 or mid 2014? I think it was mid 2014, so that they could get a lot of judges affirmed for that circuit. So, yeah, I think it still has an issue. I mean, again, I think theoretically that would make a lot of sense, but in practice, the ground has changed, and so therefore, I think we got to go in with the format that we've got when we have a new president and try to fix the stuff that's been broken over the last 6.5 years. Peter, I want to thank you for joining us today. And by the way, the link to Peter's excellent piece in the Wall Street Journal is in the show post, so you can click over to that. Peter, are you on Twitter or have your own website at all?
It's interesting you say that. I have a web name, but I haven't developed the website, which is www.nlrbchairman.com.
There you go.
But I hope within the next 6 months I'll have all these articles on.
Well, that'd be great. So we'll keep an eye out for that, and drop us a line when that happens, of course, so that we can catch up to all the things that you've been writing about that. Peter, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure talking to you today, sir.
Pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for asking.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and move that off the screen there. Sorry about that. I was bragging about how well I got that done the last time, and I screwed it up. There you go. One thing and then the other thing, and one thing and then the other thing. All right, I want to thank everybody for being with us today. I know that we had quite a few new people. We do a roll call in the chat room, so stick around for just a couple of more minutes here. I want to thank Andrew Malcolm, as always, my great friend, and such a wise media analyst, for being with me every Tuesday. So if you liked what you heard from Andrew, we're here every Tuesday doing this with Andrew Malcolm, and so be sure to tune us back in. Ashe Schow, of course, from the Washington Examiner, doing some great work over there on two different major stories, and the SPJ Airplay and Gamergate story was just such a compelling, interesting story that we had to get somebody on to talk about that, and Ashe was just the perfect person to come on and discuss what happened out there in Miami. So thank you, Ashe, and thank you, Peter Schaumber, for being on with us today as well. Now, we won't have a show on Thursday this week because I'm traveling again. We'll be back with two shows next week, Tuesday and Thursday. Dwayne won't be back for Thursday's show, so maybe we'll ask my friend Selena Zito to come on in Dwayne's place and keep her on for 40 minutes, because Selena's got her finger on the pulse of Middle America, and it's a good thing to keep a focus on in this particular cycle. It's going to be a populist cycle. You may not end up with populist nominees at the end of it, but it's a populist cycle, and even if the nominees aren't pure populists, they're going to have to engage the populist impulse in both parties. So it'll be an interesting cycle, and that's percolating up from the bottom up. So maybe we'll get Selena on then. But in the meantime, we'll be back on next Tuesday. So you can find us Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the left coast with Andrew Malcolm, and we'll have more guests than that. on next Tuesday's show as well. So let's go ahead and check and see who's been in the chat room. And we'll do a little, we'll play a little walking music while we're at that as we're heading out the door. There we go. All right, who's been in there? We've got, well, of course, Cranky T-Rex. I mentioned him earlier. That's a little loud. Let's pull that down just a little bit. Cranky T-Rex from crankytrex.blogspot.com. Also at Cranky T-Rex on Twitter. He writes at buzzpo.com and at hotair.com. And, well, you know, I'm traveling this week, Cranky, so if you're feeling interested in popping out a couple of posts, feel free. There's going to be plenty of room there for it. Let's see. Alan Bordius came back. Alan Bordius, of course, their finest hour on his own show on Monday nights, and Alan's going to put the URL for up that in the chat room. Juanito Cabron and the Monster also handling troll guns today. Monster, a longtime chat room coordinator here. He's on Twitter as well, at Sum Ergo Monstro. And I think his blog now is... I'm not even going to try it. He'll put the URL up. Everybody's going to put their URLs up in the chat room, including all you new folks, so we can find out who you are and go read your stuff. You know, Twitter handles, everything. We're all about shameless blog promotion here at the Ed Morrissey Show. Who else has been in here? Conservative and Liberal Hands. Fausta from faustasblog.com, a great Western Hemisphere blog. I read her every single day. So should you. Little known fact about Fausta, she is the author of Gamergate. She is the... No, that's not true. That's... I just like to make things up about Fausta. If it's your first visit here, whatever I say about Fausta in the last minute of the show, it's just a flat-out lie. It just is. So, but she's awesome. She's at Fausta on Twitter as well. Great blog. You should be reading her every day. Guelph, Hurricane 04. Yeah, that wasn't a lie. That's true. Mr. Fastbucks, one of the fabulous triples of the Hugh Hewitt Show, which is, by the way, coming up in about 35 minutes, and then for some reason I just got logged out, but let's try to pick that back up. Prairie Dog SD, Random Numbers, welcome to the show. Sargex is back. Sargex, our artiste in residence. TR4A, my cousin Mike. Always great to see Mike in the chat room. Via Paso at the Ancestral Morrissey Manse. Hi, Mom. And the first mate behind me, keeping me on the straight and narrow. All right, don't forget, next Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the left coast, with Andrew Malcolm of Investors.com. Don't miss a minute of the Ed Morrissey Show. We'll see you later, folks.